Guys, we're starting a journey through David. And as I said to you, I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how many sessions are going to be. It might be 2 or 3. It might be 20. But it's just been on my heart that let's have a look at David and who he is in the Lord and how he works with the Lord and what he actually does. Because it's really, sorry, I'm trying to get sorted out here. What's going on here? Stop this. On that one. There we go. To get an idea of why God dealt with David in a way, why did he choose him? And what was the whole point behind David? And, as we go through, I think let's just unpack it personally. Let's have a look at each one of us and say, well, this is my situation, or this is what the Lord is actually telling us in this situation. So let's dive straight into it. Obviously, the story is in Samuel. Now, to really understand David, we're going to be talking a fair amount of Paul, but Saul. I'm not doing something specific on Saul. But we need to understand that Saul was the first king. And Saul was very much anointed by God. He was also a person that came from obscurity, in effect. And God just selected him. But he had physical attributes. And he really is absolutely integral, because what he does is he plays the antithesis of David. So you look at Saul's life, the first king, and then you compare him to David's life. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through David, and right at the end, we'll go back and we'll have a look at Saul, and we'll work through Saul and see how the interactions, and you can see the different characters of the people. And I believe that God shows us by looking at these two men and how he reacts to these two men. Because God does that. We all know that. It's up to us to act, and then God reacts. And that's what the Bible is about, showing us how God will react. So right at the end, we'll go back and we will look at Saul, and we'll see where the two come together. Okay. And how the two characters come together. But let's have a quick look at David and his ancestry. Now, the amazing thing about this is that there's not a lot known about it. Okay. We know that his father was called Jesse, and he was a Bethlehem. He came from Bethlehem. Okay. Now, we know of another very famous person that came from Bethlehem. Please tell me. Jesus came from Bethlehem. But you don't hear about Jesse before this time. So he comes from relatively nothing and nowhere. Okay. We know that David was the youngest of 8 sons and 2 sisters, but we're also not sure. The Bible is not clear on it. And the Bible talks, and you'll see as we get into David himself, that they don't always say he had this son and that son and this son and that son. Because there were concubines, there was this wife. If one of the wives had a son and the son didn't have heirs of his own, they didn't mention him because he wasn't counted in the genealogies. So it was a different viewpoint on what family is today. So as far as we know, it's around 8 sons and 2 sisters, and his mother's unknown. Doesn't talk about his mother at all. We don't know who his mother is. Yeah. We do know that Jesse was a God-fearing man, so he would have been, and David definitely didn't come from a concubine, because he's in the line, he's in the heritage, the ancestry, whereas concubines weren't put in the ancestries. You might remember right in the beginning of the world when Abraham and Rebecca were going to have children. And what happened? He had a child with the servant. And the servant, who is Ishmael, was never put into the genealogy of Abraham, because that's not the way it worked. Yeah. Nowadays we use the term bastard child. And that's what it was. You were outside of the heritage. So we know David was definitely in the line, and it was a legalized marriage. Now the amazing thing is Jesse, and that means David, was not a full Israelite. And this is actually incredible. He was not a full Israelite. He had Moabite in him. If we go back to Ruth 4:18 and 22, you remember Ruth? Right in Jericho, when Jericho was flattened, Ruth was the prostitute. No, sorry. I'm going nuts here.
It was Rahab.
Yes, sorry. You know Ruth. Rahab was the problem. Ruth was the Jewish lady who saved the Jewish kingdom from the king. What's wrong with me tonight? Who is Ruth? Somebody tell me who Ruth was.
Naomi, and then Boaz.
There you go. And slept at his feet.
Ruth.
And picked up the wheat afterwards. Okay. Maybe somebody else needs to do this.
Boaz.
It's been a long day. Okay. So, in any case, she was a Moabite. She wasn't Israeli. Okay. Tamar. Now, I know Tamar. Tamar goes all the way back to Genesis. Yeah, if you go and look in Genesis, you'll see her name comes up there, and she wasn't Jewish herself. Yeah. So already God is starting to shake up the konya a little bit. He's starting to actually rock the boat. And if we look at the genealogies of David, and they really come in Matthew and Luke, you know, they're coming from the two different angles. You'll remember when we went through the Gospels that they came through the angles, that the genealogy of David was not actually the line of priests. You'll recall that the line of priests was the Levites. The Levites were set up as the priests. They were the priestly tribe. They were the ones who acted in the temple. They were the only ones who could be priests. Everybody else supported them. Yet God worked outside of the Levites. And that's where we get into Melchizedek. That's when we get into the whole thing that he's a new priest. He's not even in the line of the Levites. So David himself was in the line of Judah. Was in the line of Judah. Yeah. He wasn't the Lion of Judah. The Lion of Judah was Jesus himself. Okay. So David himself, again, we know of 8 wives that he had. What did he do with 8 wives? I don't know. And he also had many concubines. Okay. We don't know how many he had. Okay. There was a big collection. Okay. We know that 7 out of the 8 bore him children, and he had about 19 sons. That's all the information we really have. We have nothing direct on how many and what. And again, it gets down to what I believe in the Bible is relevant and what's not relevant. It's not relevant to the David story. And it's not relevant to what God wanted us to see in the Bible. So he didn't give us all this detail, but this is what has been gleaned through the years. And there's if you go to 1 Chronicles, and they start talking about all of these people and the masses, and 1 Chronicles says, these were all the sons of David, beside the sons of concubines, and Tamar their sister. So there was a whole bunch of sons and daughters and concubines and all this type of thing around David. We're not sure of that. Okay. So that's a brief history of who David is as a man and where he came from. I'm not going to spend too much time digging into it because we'll touch on it as we go through. So the first time we touch David in the book of Samuel, it's the first time we even hear about David. Okay. After Saul has been disinherited, for want of a word, okay, God has now turned his back on him, and he said, I'm sorry that I made Saul king. And Samuel is then told to go and anoint a new king. Yeah, that's what he's told to do. So he goes, and he goes off to Jesse, and he sits with his sons, and the sons walk past him. 7 sons walk past him. And after the 7th son has walked past him, God continually says, no, it's not him. No, it's not him. No, it's not him. And we're going to get into a magnificent scripture now of what God actually does. And we get down to the 8th son, who's not even there. But Samuel says to Jesse, is there another one? And he says, yes. There's my youngest son. Yeah? My youngest son. And he's a shepherd. And he's out in the field. So Samuel says, call him. You need to see him. So David arrives. And he's a fine statue. And you'll see we're going to get into the verses now. It talks about being a ruddy statue. So he was a handsome guy. But he wasn't this big, imposing person. Actually, his brothers were much more imposing than he was. But when he arrives, he then gets anointed. God says, this is my one. Anoint him. I've chosen him. Now again, in those days, the firstborn son was everything. But how many times did God rock what we believed, and in those days what the Jews believed? This is the way things happen. The firstborn son gets everything. The secondborn son doesn't really count. Yeah? But what does God do? He takes the youngest. He takes the youngest. And he does this all over the time. We know with Joseph. He took the youngest. Look at some verses here. So this is when Samuel looked and he saw the first son, and he was this big, handsome, strapping boy. And the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or his physical stature, because I've refused him. For the Lord does not see a man as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Now, how many times have we said that? How many times have we said those same things? That God doesn't look at what you do. He doesn't look at who you are. He doesn't look at what you are. He looks inside you, at your heart. That's what he looks at. Nothing else. So right in the days of choosing David, this is what the Lord said. And I look at their heart. And that's something as men battle to see. We normally look at the fruits of the heart to see what's coming out, to get an idea what somebody is. So David arrives from the field. He arrives from the field. And this is what happens. 1 Samuel 16:11. And guys, go and read Samuel. It's an amazing story. Samuel 1 and 2 are incredible stories. So he sent and he brought him in. And he was ready with bright eyes and good looking. The Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah. A lot of this comes from where we anoint with oil, because it's a mechanism that God's used even in these days to actually anoint people. Imagine sitting there as Samuel. You know, you want to talk about prophets and all that good stuff nowadays. If you're sitting there and you've got, if you're sitting there and you've got God talking to you every step of the way and saying, that one, not that one, not that one, there's another one, go find that. Can you imagine having that in your head? God talking to you like that? Can you imagine it? I don't know. God would really have to tone his voice down, or else I reckon your head would explode. But it's just, that's the power of anointed prophets. If you want to call yourself a prophet that the Lord said, you better be getting this sort of information. It's not an unction. It's not a feeling. It's not a leaf falling down from a tree. This is what it is. Samuel could say, the Lord said, because the Lord did say. Okay, so this is the first time we see David, where he's anointed as king, out of the blue. We don't know this guy. We've never met him. We haven't read about him. We know nothing. But out of the blue, he gets anointed as the next king. So God saw something in him that he knew he could work with. And we know already that David was a man of God. We know that from his actions that follow on from here and what he says. And as you read the story and you actually read the detail of it, you'll see it keeps coming through. It keeps coming through. Then we start getting David, and we see David entering Saul's world, because you don't hear about him again until he starts interacting with Saul. That's the next one. That's why Saul plays such an integral part in David's lifting up. So David starts interacting with Paul, but not once. There are two separate occasions, and they're not linked. And this is quite a mystery. And we'll get into it now as we go through those occasions. And you'll see that there's some anomalies here. And you'll see Saul's state of mind in these two appearances. So the first time David interacts with Saul, he interacts as an artist. He interacts as an artist. He interacts as someone who sings, who plays instruments, who's a poet. That's how he interacts the first time. And we're going to look at each one of these in detail. And then the second time he interacts with Paul, he interacts as a warrior. And we all know that story, David and Goliath. That's the second time he interacts. So there are two distinct times when he reacts, and they're completely different. They're showing completely different sides of David's character, who he is. dealing with the same man. So let's dig into each one of those. And I'm going to allow the scriptures to do it. We're just going to pop the scriptures up and we're going to read them and they will tell the story and we'll just unpack them a little bit. Okay, so 1 Samuel 16, 14 to 23. Now Saul had been a king and he'd started ignoring God and doing his own thing. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled me. Let's not get into that now. And Saul's servant said to him, surely a distressing spirit from God is troubling you. Let our master now command for your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp, an artist. And it shall be that he will play it with his hand when the distressing spirit from God is upon you, and you shall be well. So Saul said to his servants, provide me now a man who can play well and bring him to me. Then one of the servants answered and said, look, I've seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing and a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him. Therefore, Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me your son David, who is with the sheep. And Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them by his son David to Saul. So David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. David loved Saul greatly and became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent to Jesse, saying, please let David stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. Now that was necessary because David was a shepherd and under his father's control. But Paul wanted him to stay in the court. Saul wanted him to stay in the court. So that's where that comes from. And so it was, whenever the Spirit from God was upon Saul, that David would take a harp and play it with his hand. Then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit would depart from him. So this is the first interaction that David has with Saul. And that is it as an artist. That he comes before him and he shows that he is in tune with God. He's in tune with his loving kindness. It said it, mighty man of God. It shows that David is gentle and he's caring. This is the endearing side of David, that he's sitting there with somebody who's got a troubled spirit. And he's battling. And yet by playing his harp and singing, he calms him down. And all David's poetry, we know them as psalms. All of David's prayers and his songs are worshipful. I've called him a worshipful poet. That's what he is. So this is the side of Saul, side of David that Saul is seeing. There's this artful, this caring, this loving side of David. Now, before we get into the Psalms, I just need to put a little bit of a codicil in here. It is impossible, not only for me, I've been doing a lot of research and trying to find out, to put the Psalms in a chronological order. What came when? Some of them have got the headings, and we'll go into those at some stage where we say, with the Psalm itself, we'll say, when David was doing this at that king. So that's very clear. But there's very few of them have got that. So the majority of Psalms, we don't know where David was when he was writing them. David could well have been writing Psalms, and he says it further down the scriptures, as we'll go through it later. He says he used to sit and write praise songs while he was watching his sheep. He would write poetry. So we don't know. So it's really a guesstimate of where these Psalms sit. Now, I mentioned as a teaser that at this stage, Saul needed calmness when the troubled spirit hit him. And what is the greatest psalm when you're in troubled waters? Psalm 23. And as much as we always take this psalm on and we think David, when he was going through the troubles, he wrote this. Yes. But would this not have been a perfect song to calm somebody down? Don't we use it today when we've got people that are troubled and they believe in the Lord, and we bring them back to this psalm all the time? Now, these psalms were set to music. And you'll read, when you go through the psalms, you'll read, orchestra play it to Sounds of the Lily, which would have been a tune. And unfortunately, we simply don't have those tunes anymore. We don't know. We don't know. And of course, they were in Hebrew. So English, you're going to battle a little bit. Even though musically, those of you that know anything about music, there's a thing in music called meter. And it's almost like a beat, but it's more than a beat. It's actually a flow that goes where the words flow. And there's a specific meter in the Psalms that many, many people sing to. And even when they're translated, the meter still works. They've got to mess with the words a little bit, but the meter still works. So these are written as lyrics. So imagine David sitting there, Saul in a troubled way, troubled state of mind. And David skillfully on his harp. Now the harp is such a gentle, beautiful thing. And the harps in those days wasn't this huge, big thing that you see in the orchestra today. It was more of a handheld, more of a lyre sort of thing. And you'd be singing this. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I just have this picture of Saul sitting there troubled and hearing this music playing and these words. Bear in mind, Saul knew God. God had turned his back on him. So the peace and the calm came through. I just find that incredible. It really, really is. And it just fits so nicely. I'm not going to go into all the Psalms in depth because you know we can have hours on each one of these Psalms, but just get the mood of the Psalm and where it is. What is that? Okay, so that's the first appearance of David into Saul's life, that he was doing this. Now, this is where there's a little of an anomaly here. And you've got to think about Saul's mindset and the time taken and what it meant to be a king in those days. Kings had this hierarchy. They sat in their throne. You weren't allowed into the throne room. You were one of 1,000 people running around their court, all of them vying for your attention. And there was this one guy who would play and sing. There were most probably 50 others in that court. We don't know, but it's only explanation to what happens here. Now, this is what happens, and again, I'm just leaving this up to the scriptures to give us the story. But what happens here, and we know the story of David and Goliath, where they are fighting the Philistines. The Israelites and the Philistines are fighting, as they always do. And David is too young to be in the army. I reckon he's about 15 at this stage. He's too young to be in the army. But his father sends him to take food. Because again, in those days you had an army. Okay? Armies used to travel with their families very often. With all their household goods. They used to provide their own food. That's the way armies worked in those days. That's why the Roman army was so powerful, because it didn't work like that. But that was an accepted norm. So you were in the army and they would have to keep sending you food to sustain you. So David went to give food. And I haven't put the whole thing here, but I want you to go read the story again. Just about how Goliath is standing and challenging everyone. Now, we need to understand this term giant. This is very interesting. Very interesting. Historically, they have proven that people in those ages were actually quite short. Quite short. average height of a man in those days was about 5'5". And there's a reason for that. And it's actually incredible. If you go to medieval castles, go around Europe, go look at medieval castles, you'll see the majority of them, not all of them, the majority of them, their doors are quite low. And it's a fact. Go and have a look. Their doors are quite low because people weren't big. They were quite small. Scientists put it down to the fact that their nutrition was not like ours is today. That they battled with food. There wasn't a constant supply of food. They never ate the way we ate. Yeah? Now, I don't know. I'm not going to get into that debate, but that's the theory behind it. So when somebody came along and he was a giant, it didn't mean he was 14 foot tall. It didn't mean that. Yeah? He could have been someone who was, maybe as tall as Shane. Yeah. Shane would have had people throwing stones at him.
I'm on the right diet, clearly.
So when they talk about a giant, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about a sizable guy. He was mostly 6'5", 7, 6'8", somewhere around there. There was a family of them. And you read about Goliath being killed. You read about his brother being killed. So there was obviously a family of people that had genetics that they were big. They were big guys. And this is who they claimed the giant. So forget the whole story that it was the angels that came down and bred with this and made giant. It's not that. Okay, it's not that. Okay. This is what the size of these guys were. And they spoke about the size of his spear. All of that was showing just how strong and powerful this guy was. Okay, in comparison to the rest of the guys who were pretty small. Yeah. So David arrives. Goliath comes out. He's shouting his challenge. And I've just taken a piece out of it here. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported him to Saul, and he sent for him. So David had said, who is this guy to shout against my God? Who is he? This is not on. I'll take him out. Because everybody else was too scared to. So those were the words. So they heard it. They went and told Saul. Saul said, bring him out. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail him. Because of him, your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. He's saying, I'll go fight with him. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're a youth. And he is a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be one like them. I love that content. It's just like, really. Seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Now that's the kicker. Moreover, David said, the Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. How's that? How's that? For confidence in the Lord. Already David is saying, it wasn't me who fought the lion and the bear. It was the Lord allowed me to do it, and he delivered me. He'll do the same thing here. Wow. Eh? How amazing is that? Yeah. He will deliver me from the hand of the Philistines. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head, and he also clothed him with a coat of mail. How's that for David's heart? Huh? How's that for David's heart? Saying, it's not up to me. The Lord protected me against bears and lions. Who's this guy? This uncircumcised Philistine? He's going to get out smacked today. I'm going to go give it to him because the Lord is with me. I love that confidence. Imagine if we had that sort of boldness to go before people anywhere with that sort of confidence. Incredible stuff. I just made a note here, and I'm going to come back to this. I want you to remember this because it's very, very important what happens here. So Saul clothed David with his armor and put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. Transferring is big in this story. Transferring of power, transferring of authority is very big. And yes, he's giving him a coat of mail and he's giving him armor. Okay? But notice the word. So Saul clothed David with his armor. He didn't go and say, let me get some armor that fits this guy. Soldier over there, give him your armor. He gave him his armor. Now, this symbolism comes through about 3 or 4 times as we go through the story about how David's position as anointed king is recognized, even by people that don't want to recognize it. And in those days, giving somebody your clothes was vesting your power and authority in them. So these are very, very important words. Saul himself gave his armor. He said, take my armor, take my kingship, take my authority and put it on you, not somebody else's.
So, brother, it's almost like he passed his mantle over to him.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. And you'll see as we get into later, and specifically the relationship between Jonathan and David, you'll see how pertinent this becomes. That's why I've circled it here. It's very, very important. And in those days, the way it was so important, and Andres nailed it. You remember Elijah and Elisha? He put his mantle on him. It was the only way that he transferred all of his power. He put his mantle on him. Elijah said, give me your mantle. Give me double. And that's what he did. Transferring the power through. Transferring his authority. Transferring his position. So right now, right here, Saul, and I believe it might have been did subconsciously, didn't even realize what he was doing. But he saw the king in front of him, even though he was king. No wonder he was going batty. Okay, important words, important words. So let's have a look. So here we had David as the warrior. This is the second time that he interacts with Saul. Now, don't you think it's a bit strange that Saul didn't recognize him? This is the guy that plays the harp. This is the guy that sings Psalm 23 that calms me down when I'm in a crazy mood. And the Bible doesn't give us an explanation for that. We just need to look at the human side of it. And I've already said, you're talking about Saul, people clamoring for his attention. David could have been one of 50 musicians. We don't know. We don't know. Or when David was there, was Saul so out of his head that he didn't really recognize who he was in? Or didn't he care? Was he that arrogant that it was just somebody who played? Who knows? Who knows? But it's an interesting one. And the Bible doesn't tell us why. The Bible just says this is what's happened, and you've read the scriptures. This is what happened. So now, David comes in, and he's introduced to Saul as a warrior. And he's in tune with the protection of God. God is with me. Who's this uncircumcised Philistine? He's got no chance. Lovely. Almost a little bit arrogant. Imagine being arrogant in God. You know, God is with me. I can be arrogant. Yeah? Think about it. We were talking about Elijah now, when Elijah went and they wiped out 400 of the Baal priests. Remember that old story? One against 400. But he's like, Lord's with me. So what? Nothing you can do. How amazing is that? Okay? David is fearless with God. This is what Saul sees. Fearless with God. He's nothing in himself. 15-year-old ruddy little puny okie. Okay? And David is confident in God. Confident in God. You know, and if we just look at these 2 episodes, and we look at the way that David is introduced into the kingship, he's been anointed, but this is where he starts getting introduced into the kingship, because from here, everything takes off in his life.
Yes.
Do we have to really go into any further depth in looking at who David is and why God chose David as the best king ever, as the shining light? That Jesus himself will come from his lineage? We could stop right there. We could stop right there. Because we've got artists, we've got humility, we've got caring, we've got grace, we've got confidence in God. We've got confidence that God will defend him. We've got fearless in God. We've got all these attributes that we would love to have. But don't worry, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to Hanan, because I love this too much. But you see what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? It's not magnificent. is how God chooses his people. And what I've done, and remember what I said about the Psalms, so difficult to link a Psalm to a particular area in David's life. But I've gone and I've just taken a flyer and I've just put a Psalm in here that I think covers what we're talking about. So it's Psalm 11. And to the chief musician, again, music, Psalm of David. In the Lord I put my trust. What are we saying? How can you say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? Well, look, the wicked bend their bow, and they make ready their arrow on the string. Could be Goliath. That they may shoot secretly at the upright in the heart. If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids test the sons of men. The Lord tests the righteous. And go fight Goliath, it's quite a test. But the wicked and the one who loves violence, his soul hates. Upon the wicked he will rain coals, fire and brimstone, and a burning wind shall be the portion of their cup. For the Lord is righteous. He loves righteousness. His countenance beholds the upright. These things just stir my soul. They make my spirit just fly. Now, these are songs, these are prayers that God himself has decided to put in our Bible. That God has said, use these. This is true. And this is David. So let's just summarize these two quickly. So David appears as an artist, caring, loving, gentle. David appears as a warrior, not in his own strength at all. Solely and utterly dependent on Father God to look after him and guide him and deliver him. David comes across in these two as a complete man who trusts in God. He's got the soft side. He's got the tough side. It's held together. Unrelenting love, belief in God the Father. So that's the David we're going to be talking about as we go further into his life and just delve into the story. But isn't it amazing how our Lord God gives us a story? He gives us a narrative. It's almost like a parable that we can understand through seeing how somebody else has lived. And that's what this is all about. Yeah. Guys, let's go into communion.